I went to find my husband before digging into the cake at our son's birthday party, and I found him getting ready to dig into his ex-wife's cake instead. But I didn't stop them, and now I'm crumbling inside. How do I forgive this? I'm honestly a mess and I don't know what to do, so any advice would be appreciated. I, 27M, and my husband, 37M, have been married for 3 years, dating for 6. He has an ex-wife, 37F, which he divorced a year before we met. We have a son, 7M, who was adopted after we got married and who I love as my own child, because he is. I know my husband, Peter, fake name, is bisexual. I have no problem with it, and I had no problem with his ex-wife, Allison, also fake name. I did have a problem with his family as they're a bit homophobic and are always telling Peter he should get back together with Allison. Well, 2 weeks ago, we were at his family's town because it was my son, Jack's, fake name, birthday, and we wanted to spend it as family. My mother-in-law decided it would be a good idea to invite Allison, so she arrived in the middle of the party. I didn't want to ruin Jack's birthday, so I stayed quiet. I spent all my time with Jack, playing with him and his cousins at his request. When it was time to cut the cake, I noticed Allison and Peter weren't there, so I went inside and looked for them around the house. I found them in Peter's old bedroom taking their clothes off. I stood there in shock for a moment, but then I left and went back to celebrating Jack's birthday. Part of me wanted to scream and cry, but I also was in shock and I refused to make Jack's birthday about me. We cut the cake and opened the presents. People were already leaving when Allison and Peter came back. Peter took me aside and started saying that I shouldn't have cut the cake without him present and it was disrespectful. I stared at him and just said, "I'm sorry, I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He got quiet, so I took Jack and left the house to go back to the hotel. Once I put Jack in bed and made sure he was asleep, I locked myself in the bathroom and broke down. I called a friend and he tried his best to console me. I only calmed down in the morning when I took Jack for breakfast because I didn't want him to see me like that. I'm now watching him play in the park and I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to have a broken family. I don't want him to know that relationships aren't a happy ever after. Peter has been calling and texting, apologizing for everything, and I'm tempted to forgive him. I'm tempted to just have my family back, and all my friends are saying that it was just a mistake, that he was vulnerable and Allison is his ex-wife. So what am I supposed to do now? I need the advice from people who don't know my husband or me personally. Please, any advice is helpful. Update 1. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for your advice, and I want to explain some things before the actual update. But, thank you for opening my eyes about my situation. Peter and Allison didn't notice me when I saw them. There was music very loud downstairs and they weren't facing the door. I didn't stop them because I was in shock. I just stood there for a moment and I heard my son, so I unconsciously focused on him. I was pretty much in autopilot. Peter didn't come to the hotel with me because I changed to a different one. He did try to follow me, but I took a taxi and left. As far as I know, he's staying with his parents and Allison left. We met when I was 20 and he was 30, we started as friends, and we ended up dating. Yes, we're both men, and no, I didn't feel manipulated or groomed by him. Those were the most asked things, and I did answer some comments, not all. Now on to the update. I did as some of you said and took some tests to discard any STIs or STDs. The results are coming back in a few days, and I will take another one in 3 weeks to be sure. My son is having a sleepover with a friend and I decided to speak with my husband. He came by our house. After a few minutes I texted him. He asked about Jack and I told him where he was. Then we sat on the couch and started talking. I started crying after a few minutes and he followed after. I asked some simple questions: when? Why? How many times? Among others, and this is what I could figure out by all the things he said. It happened for the first time when he visited his parents alone 2 years ago. They invited her, they both got drunk, he was feeling lonely as I had been more attention to Jack since we adopted him, and they slept together. Nothing happened again until our son's birthday party. He said his mother pressured him a bit and he caved in. I don't believe he did it for that reason, but I don't know. He said he doesn't love her and I believe him, but it doesn't negate the fact of what he did. After talking for a while, I told him that I wanted a divorce. He started sobbing and begging for another chance, but I told him that I can't give him another chance because I wouldn't be able to trust him again and I don't want that in a relationship. He kept crying and begging for another 30 minutes until I told him that we have to think about Jack and his well-being, that we could stay friends DS and co-parent him. He got mad, really mad. He started yelling that it was all Jack's fault, that we shouldn't have adopted him, that he's the one who's getting between us. I was crying and really scared. I had never seen him this angry. He hit the table and stormed out of the house. I called the house where Jack is staying at and told them if Peter shows up there, they can't open the door. After the little episode, I was scared that Peter would try to hurt Jack. I called my friend again, Thomas, and told him everything that happened. He came by and is staying with me until I'm better. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what to do and how to go on with the divorce. Update 2. Hi again. Sorry for taking so long to update, but it's been a chaotic week and I'm pretty shaken up, but I'll try to summarize it. My husband has been showing up at my work, following me, and calling me from burner phones. I was afraid he'd go after Jack like many of you said he would, but he didn't. He said a lot of stuff, but I'll try to write the important things. He said that he missed when we were just us, that I stopped paying attention to him when we adopted that Jack, that I wasn't his, anymore. He said that he missed how dependent I was on him. I was very insecure when we met, but I started working on my issues when we adopted Jack because I didn't want to be a bad example for him. When we got married, I used to get sick all the time. I was weak and tired, so he would take care of me 24/7. The doctors couldn't tell what was wrong with me and I didn't get better until a bit after we adopted Jack. I guess that dependence it's what he missed? Yesterday, he followed me to work and started screaming that I was his and that we made vows to stay together. We had to call security and he waited for me next to my car. I panicked and took a taxi home. He keeps messaging me and showing up to our house. I took a few weeks off work to be with Jack, although he's taking this better than me. I made an appointment with a therapist for him, and when the divorce is finalized, I'll go to one myself. I've been debating what to do, so I'll update when something happens. Update 3. Hi guys, this is the final update for anyone who is interested. I'm only doing this update to give it some closure and because some people messaged me to ask for it. So here it is. This has been a really difficult time, but I'm almost divorced. I have primary custody of Jack, and I've got a restriction order against Peter and Allison. I'll try to be quick, but a lot happened. So, after I made the post, Peter kept calling and stalking me. I didn't know what to do until I started packing Peter's stuff and I found a box of pictures of me before we met, like 3 or 4 years before we met, while he was still married to Allison. I never knew why they got divorced. He just said it was too painful to talk about, so I never asked. But I swallowed my anger and sent Allison a message to ask her about the pictures, and she told me that they got divorced because she saw him stalking my Facebook several times and found the same box I did. He called it an innocent crush and curiosity, but she thought he was cheating on her and they got divorced. A year later, he met me, but Allison always thought that I was the side piece. I read a few comments saying that I maybe was sick because he was making me sick. I don't know if that's possible. I don't really know. I mean, the illness were bad enough to make me stay in bed, like having a bad cold, but I don't know. I stopped digging. After I found the pictures, I confronted Peter without Jack in the house and he seemed, I don't know, proud? He kept smiling and saying that all he did was for us, that it was love at first sight, and we were destined. He was just making sure it happened. Apparently, we had met before we became friends. I remember meeting him at a party through some friends, but we met before, as teenagers. He and I lived in close by towns and my school made some trips to the towns nearby and we met on one of those trips. We were something like friends, but only for a summer because he went to college and I soon forgot about him. But he found my Facebook, and the story continued. I was horrified, to say the least. He tried to console me and tell me that it was fine, that he did it out of love, and that if only we hadn't adopted Jack, everything would be fine. I was bawling my eyes out. My entire marriage was a lie. He said that he only slept with Allison because he knew that it would get my attention and that we didn't have to go through with the divorce, that I know he loves me and that's it. He promised to be a better dad for Jack if I made more time for him. He told me to quit my job because he earned enough to take care of all of us and that would give me more time with him. I was in shock and then he hugged, calming me down. I admit that for a moment, I allowed him to hold me. I allowed myself to consider his proposal, but I kept thinking about his lies. It wasn't about the cheating, it was the stalking, the lies, the obsession. It creeped me out, so I tried to pull away and tell him I'd go through with the divorce. He refused. He hugged me tighter and screamed that I needed him, that he could protect me, he could take care of me, he could save me, that I was his husband and only his. I was terrified. I slapped him and pulled away, yelling at him to get out of my house. He didn't. He just kept screaming and holding on to me until a neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. I filed a restriction order and been taking care of Jack since. During the divorce proceedings, Peter asked for 50-50 custody, which surprised me because in all this time, he hasn't cared about seeing Jack, but I later found out that it was only because he would get to see me and talk to me regularly. He's been contesting every single thing about the divorce, trying to make it last longer than it has, and it's been working. He offered to give me child support even though we have 50-50 custody. He allowed me to keep the house, and other stuff. So, that's what's been going on in my life. The only happy thing that happened was Halloween. Jack insisted on dressing up as Spider-Man and me dressing up as Tony Stark, so we did and I took him trick-or-treating. It was the most adorable sight ever and I knew I made the right choice with him and Peter. I'm sorry for such a long post, but this will probably be the last update. Thank you so much for the advice and for hearing me rant.